What happens when privilege walks into a courtroom and mistakes influence for authority? Today's story exposes a moment where entitlement met the law and lost. Watch closely because this lesson applies far beyond one name or one case. If you value real accountability and unfiltered courtroom truth like the video, subscribe to the channel and stay locked in for stories that power doesn't want told. I have presided over thousands of cases: disorderly conduct, felonies, ego, desperation, lies wrapped in confidence, and confidence wrapped in fear. By the time you sit where I sit, arrogance is no longer surprising, it's routine. But that morning, as I took my seat behind the bench, I could feel something different in the air. Not tension, not fear, entitlement. The most dangerous thing that ever walks into a courtroom. The bailiff called the room to order. Wood benches creaked. Phones were slipped into pockets. The murmurs died down. I adjusted my glasses and scanned the room the way I always do. Slowly, deliberately. Faces tell stories long before mouths do. That's when I saw him, young, tailored suit, no tie, relaxed posture, arms stretched casually across the bench like he was waiting for a table at a restaurant, not standing before the law. His leg bounced with impatience, not nerves. He wasn't afraid of the room. That told me everything. "Call the defendant," the clerk announced. Christian Combs stepped forward. Yes, that last name. I've learned something over the years. When a name enters the courtroom before the person does, trouble follows. Some names carry respect, others carry reputation, and some carry an expectation that rules bend automatically. Christian looked around as he approached the defense table, almost smiling, acknowledging whispers like applause. He wasn't here to defend himself, he was here to perform. I folded my hands and waited. Judges who rush lose authority. Silence is far more effective. The charges were read: disorderly conduct, contempt adjacent behavior, an incident that should have ended quietly, but didn't, because ego never knows when to exit. When his attorney finished speaking, I looked directly at Christian. "Mr. Combs," I said calmly, "before we proceed, is there anything you'd like to say on your own behalf?" That's when he leaned forward. Not respectfully, not cautiously, confidently. He smirked. "Yeah," he said, "I think this whole thing is being blown way out of proportion." I nodded once. "Go on." He glanced around the courtroom again, at the spectators, at the deputies, at the cameras he clearly assumed were there. Then he said it, the sentence that changed the temperature of the room. "My dad runs hip-hop." A few people laughed under their breath. Someone whispered, "Oh, damn." The bailiff stiffened. His lawyer's face tightened like a man watching a slow-motion car crash. I did not react. That bothered him. "My father is Sean Combs," he continued. "This kind of stuff, it disappears. You know how this goes." I leaned back slightly in my chair. In my courtroom, I've seen power try to speak louder than the law many times. Politicians, CEOs, celebrities, their children, their friends, their shadows. Every single one of them makes the same mistake. They think influence travels faster than authority. It doesn't. I looked at him and asked one simple question. "Mr. Combs, do you know where you are right now?" He chuckled. Actually chuckled. "I mean, yeah," he said. "Court, obviously." "No," I replied evenly. "You're in my courtroom." That was the first crack. The smile faltered, just slightly. I continued. "This is not a record label. This is not an industry room. This is not a backstage hallway where names get you favors." I leaned forward. "This is a court of law." The room was silent now. Christian shifted his weight. I could tell he was deciding whether to back down or double down. He chose wrong. "So what?" he said. "You gonna pretend like my last name doesn't matter?" That's when I shut the book, figuratively and soon, very literally. I straightened, my voice calm but razor sharp. "Mr. Combs," I said, "your last name means nothing here." His attorney whispered urgently to him. Christian waved him off. "Bad move. In fact," I continued, "the only thing your name does in this courtroom is remove excuses. Because privilege comes with responsibility. and you seem to have confused fame with immunity. You could hear breathing now. Christian's jaw tightened. His confidence had shifted into irritation, the kind of irritation that comes when someone refuses to be impressed. He scoffed. You think you can just talk to me like that? I nodded. Yes, I said, and I'm being generous by doing it calmly. The bailiff took half a step forward. Christian didn't notice. He leaned closer to the microphone. My dad doesn't like being disrespected. That was it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam the gavel. I simply looked at him the way a surgeon looks before making the first cut. Mr. Combs, I said, this court does not answer to your father. Pause. This court does not fear your father. Pause. And this court most certainly does not negotiate with threats disguised as confidence. That's when I reached for the file, slowly, deliberately, and the room understood this wasn't going the way he thought it would. I opened the file in front of me, not because I needed to read it, I already knew every line, but because paper has weight, and weight reminds people where authority lives. Christian watched my hands instead of my face. That's another tell. When confidence starts cracking, eyes look for exits. Mr. Combs, I said, turning a page slowly, do you understand what contempt of court is? He leaned back again, trying to recover his posture. I know what disrespect is, he replied, and I feel like I'm getting plenty of it. I exhaled through my nose. Not a sigh, a controlled breath. Judges who sigh lose ground. Contempt, I explained, is not about feelings, it's about behavior, specifically behavior that shows open defiance toward the authority of the court. I looked directly at him. You are walking a very thin line. He smirked again, but this time it was forced. Defensive. With all due respect, he said, emphasizing the phrase without understanding it, I don't think locking me up over words would look very good. There it was, the real threat. Not violence, not shouting, public optics. I've seen this move before. When the law doesn't scare someone, they try to scare the image of the law. I tilted my head slightly. You're worried about how I look? He shrugged. I'm just saying people watch this stuff. I nodded once. You're right. He straightened, encouraged. People do watch. Then I leaned forward again. And what they're watching right now is a young man who believes his father's success entitles him to talk down to a court. The murmurs came back. Sharper this time, not impressed murmurs, judgmental ones. Christian's lawyer finally stood. Your Honor, if I may, I raised a hand. Sit down. He sat. Christian laughed quietly. That laugh. The one people do when they don't realize they're losing. You see, Christian said, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Power trips. That word, power. People misunderstand it constantly. Power isn't volume. It isn't posture. It isn't fame or money or last names. Power is control without effort. Mr. Combs, I said, you walked into this courtroom believing you were untouchable. He rolled his eyes. And now, I continued, you're discovering that the one place your family name doesn't carry weight is the place built to be immune to it. His jaw clenched. I could see anger rising, not rage, but embarrassment. And embarrassed people are reckless. So what? He snapped. You gonna make an example out of me? I didn't answer immediately. Silence again. I let it stretch long enough for him to feel it, long enough for the spectators to lean forward. Then I spoke. No, Mr. Combs, I said evenly, you're making an example out of yourself. That's when he stood up without permission. The courtroom reacted instantly, chairs scraping, the bailiff moving forward, tension snapping tight like a wire. Sit. Down, I said. He didn't. This is bullshit, he muttered. You know who you're dealing with? I nodded. Yes, I said calmly. A defendant. That word hit harder than anything else I could have said. Defendant, not son, not celebrity adjacent, not important, just accountable. Mr. Combs, I continued, my voice firm now, you have interrupted proceedings, dismissed the authority of the court, and implied consequences beyond this room. I closed the file. Would you like to continue speaking or would you like your attorney to do his job? Christian hesitated. That hesitation mattered, because for the first time since he walked in, he realized something. This room was not impressed. He slowly sat back down, but instead of backing off, he leaned toward the microphone again. You really think this ends here? He said quietly. My family doesn't forget disrespect. That was the moment, not because it was loud, not because it was dramatic, but because it crossed from arrogance into intimidation. I straightened fully in my chair. The gavel remained untouched. I want the record to reflect, I said clearly, that the defendant has just issued a statement that can reasonably be interpreted as an attempt to intimidate this court. His lawyer's face went pale. Christian blinked. What? He said. That's not. I'm not finished, I replied. This court does not respond to implied threats. It responds to facts, conduct, and the law. I paused. And the fact is, Mr. Combs, you are dangerously close to learning that confidence without discipline is just arrogance with a countdown. The room was dead silent. He swallowed. For the first time, his eyes flicked toward the bailiff, toward the doors, toward reality. Now, I said, you have two options. I held up one finger. You may apologize to this court and allow your attorney to proceed properly. I raised a second finger. Or you may continue down this path, and we will address your behavior immediately. Christian looked at his lawyer. The lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently now, no longer advising, begging. Christian's lips tightened. Pride wrestled with self-preservation, and pride has a habit of losing late. Christian leaned back in his chair, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the ceiling for a split second, the universal gesture of someone searching for patience they don't actually possess. His lawyer was still whispering, voice low, urgent, the kind of whisper that carries panic, disguised as professionalism. Christian nodded slowly, not in agreement, in irritation. Then he looked back at me. I'll apologize, he said. But let's be clear. I'm doing this because I respect the process, not because I'm scared of it. There it was again. The need to control the narrative. Even surrender had to sound like dominance. I didn't respond immediately. I waited. People who talk themselves into holes usually do so if you give them just enough silence. Go ahead, I said at last. He cleared his throat, turned slightly toward the bench, and said, I apologize if anything I said was taken the wrong way. Conditional, defensive, not an apology, a press release. I raised an eyebrow. Try again. The courtroom shifted. Christian blinked. His confidence was leaking now, seeping out in small, visible cracks. I said I'm sorry, he replied, sharper than he intended. No, I said calmly. You said if anyone was offended, that places responsibility on the listener, not the speaker. I folded my hands. In this courtroom, accountability is not optional. His lawyer closed his eyes. Christian inhaled deeply through his nose. You could almost see the calculation happening, weighing pride against consequences. Fine, he said. I apologize for being disrespectful to the court. Better. Not good, but better. I nodded once. Thank you. He exhaled, relieved, assuming the storm had passed. It hadn't. Now, I continued, we're going to address something else. His shoulders stiffened. You made multiple references to your father's influence. Do you understand why that is inappropriate in a legal proceeding? He shrugged. I was just stating facts. No, I said. You were attempting leverage. That word landed hard. Let me be very clear, I continued. This court has heard from murderers who claimed innocence, from millionaires who claimed ignorance, from politicians who claimed misunderstanding. I leaned forward slightly. And not one of them improved their situation by reminding me who they were connected to. Christian swallowed. You don't intimidate a system by name-dropping, I said. You expose insecurity. A ripple moved through the spectators. Subtle, controlled, but real. Christian shifted in his seat, crossing his arms now. Defensive posture. The confidence was gone. What remained was resentment. So what? he said. You going to lecture me now? I didn't answer that directly. Instead, I asked him a question. Mr. Combs, I said, how old are you? He hesitated. 26. At 26, I replied. Most people are trying to prove who they are. I paused. You seem more concerned with proving who your father is. That stung. His eyes hardened. You don't know me. I know exactly what you showed this court today, I said. And courts don't work with reputations, they work with records. I tapped the file. And this record shows a pattern of dismissiveness toward authority. His lawyer straightened. Your Honor, if I may address. You may, I said. The lawyer stood, smoothing his tie with hands that betrayed tension. Mr. Combs understands the seriousness of these proceedings, he began. He regrets his choice of words and assures the court there was no intent to intimidate. I looked at Christian. Is that accurate? Christian nodded quickly. Yeah. I held his gaze. No intent? I repeated. Just habit. He frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I replied, you're accustomed to rooms where pushback is optional. I leaned back. This isn't one of those rooms. The bailiff shifted his weight. The deputies remained still. The court reporter's fingers flew across the keys. Everything was being recorded now, not just legally, but socially. Moments like this don't disappear anymore. They live forever. Mr. Combs, I said, you've been given an opportunity to reset. Don't waste it. He nodded, more subdued now. Understood. We proceeded with the formalities, evidence summaries, procedural clarifications. His attorney did what attorneys do best, clean up messes made by clients who speak before thinking. But Christian wasn't finished. Not really. Because entitlement doesn't evaporate, it simmers. And as I prepared to move toward resolution, he leaned toward the microphone one last time. Just so we're clear, he said, voice low, controlled, this isn't over. I looked at him without blinking. Oh, I said, it absolutely is. He frowned. You think so? Yes, I replied, because once you leave this courtroom, your influence resumes. I paused. But inside it? I let the silence answer for me. You were given respect today not because of who your father is, I continued, but because this system assumes every defendant is capable of learning. I tilted my head. The question now is whether you're willing to. He didn't respond. And that, more than anything he'd said all day, told me exactly how this story was going to end. Courtrooms don't explode into chaos the way movies show. There's no dramatic music, no shouting matches that last minutes. Real authority doesn't announce itself. It tightens, quietly, relentlessly. As proceedings continued, I noticed Christian wasn't listening anymore. His eyes drifted, his jaw clenched and unclenched. He was waiting, not for justice, but for an opening. People like him always believe there's a back door. There isn't. Mr. Combs, I said, interrupting his internal monologue, stand. He hesitated. Just half a second. That half second mattered. Stand, I repeated. He rose slowly, hands adjusting his jacket, chin raised, posture as armor, pride as posture. I looked at him the way I look at every defendant who forgets where they are. You seem to believe this process is something happening to you, I said. It isn't. He frowned. Then what is it? It's a mirror, I replied, and today you don't like the reflection. His lawyer shifted uncomfortably. The bailiff remained still. A reminder, not a threat. You were brought here for conduct that disrupted public order, I continued. That alone is manageable. I paused. What you added, arrogance, dismissal, implied intimidation, is what complicates matters. Christian exhaled sharply. So what? You're going to throw the book at me because I hurt your feelings? I didn't react. This court doesn't have feelings, I said. It has standards. I picked up my pen. And standards apply most firmly to those who believe they're above them. The room was so quiet you could hear the faint hum of the lights. Mr. Combs, I said, you were given multiple opportunities to course correct today. He opened his mouth. I raised a finger. I'm still speaking. That finger stopped him cold. When you first spoke, you chose bravado. When corrected, you chose defiance. When warned, you chose implication. I leaned forward slightly. Those were choices. His expression hardened. You act like I committed a crime just by talking. No, I replied. You committed a mistake by assuming this was a negotiation. I turned a page in the file. The law doesn't bend because someone believes it should. I closed the file again. Now we move to consequences. Christian's lawyer stood abruptly. Your Honor, I raised my hand again. Sit. He sat. Christian's eyes flicked to his attorney, then back to me. This time there was no smile, no smirk, just tension. You will be fined for the initial offense, I said. You will complete a court-ordered program focused on civic responsibility and respect for legal authority. He scoffed before he could stop himself. Additionally, I continued, you will receive a formal warning regarding contempt. Not today, but it will be on record. His eyes widened slightly. On record? He asked. Yes, I said, the kind that follows you into rooms where influence usually speaks first. Silence. I could see the realization forming now. Slow, unwelcome, unavoidable. This wasn't about jail, it was about legacy. You're done here, I said finally. But understand this, Mr. Combs. I met his eyes and didn't let go. You were not shut down today because of who your father is. I paused. You were shut down because of who you chose to be in this room. He stood there, motionless. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down once, not loud, not angry, final. Christian turned to leave. His shoulders were tense. His steps were faster now, not confident but urgent. The armor was gone. As he reached the doors, he hesitated. He didn't turn around, but he stopped. That pause told me more than any words he'd spoken all day, because for the first time, the weight followed him out, and that's how authority works, not by chasing you, but by staying exactly where it is, unmoved. Courtrooms empty fast after adjournment. People rush out like pressure released from a valve. Defendants eager to breathe again. Lawyers already rewriting events in their heads. Spectators hunting for a version of the story that sounds better when retold. I stay seated for a moment after everyone leaves. Always have. A judge who rushes out of the room is a judge still reacting. I don't react. I conclude. Christian's footsteps echoed down the hallway outside. Quick, clipped, uneven. Not the stride of someone victorious. The stride of someone trying to outrun embarrassment. His lawyer trailed behind him, voice low, urgent again. I didn't need to hear the words to know the tone. Damage control. People think court ends when the gavel drops. That's wrong. Court ends when the lesson lands. I gathered the files slowly, stacking them with care. Order matters. Even when the world outside the courtroom thrives on chaos, this room has rules. That contrast unsettles people who rely on noise. As I stood, the bailiff approached. Your Honor, he said quietly, that one thought he was untouchable. I nodded. They usually do. But he looked shaken by the end. I allowed myself the faintest smile. That's because reality doesn't raise its voice, it just arrives. I stepped into chambers, closing the door behind me. The courtroom was empty now, but the moment wasn't over. It rarely is. I've seen this pattern my entire career. A young man walks in wearing someone else's shadow, mistaking proximity to power for ownership of it. The law doesn't strip that illusion aggressively. It lets it collapse under its own weight. Christian wasn't a villain. He wasn't evil. He was something far more common, untested. Untested people confuse access with authority. They think doors open because of who they are, not because someone else allowed it. Courts exist to correct that misunderstanding. Later that afternoon, I reviewed the transcript. Words looked different on paper, stripped of tone, exposed. My dad runs hip-hop. That sentence will live longer than he expects, not because it was dramatic, but because it revealed dependency. A man who truly runs something never needs to say it out loud, and a man who stands on his own never borrows someone else's reach. I've had defendants threaten lawsuits, call mayors, call donors, call their fathers. None of it changes the math. The law doesn't negotiate with identity. The irony is this: had Christian walked in quietly, respectful, prepared to accept responsibility, this would have been forgettable. A fine, a lesson, a footnote. Instead, he turned a footnote into a headline, and headlines don't ask permission before spreading. Days later, I heard murmurs outside the courthouse, people talking, commentators speculating, opinions stacking on opinions. That's not my concern. Courts don't chase public approval, they anchor it. What mattered to me was simpler. A young man walked into my courtroom believing influence was inherited. He walked out understanding it isn't. That understanding may fade. Ego has a way of healing faster than wisdom, but once planted, the seed remains. It shows up the next time he opens his mouth in a room that doesn't owe him anything, and one day, maybe years from now, he'll remember this moment not as humiliation, but as calibration. Because authority doesn't humiliate, it clarifies. I locked the file and placed it on the shelf where it would remain, silent, patient, permanent. Another case concluded, another illusion corrected, and tomorrow the doors would open again. They always do. Before I end this record, there's something I want understood, not for the transcript, not for commentators, not for headlines, but for anyone listening who believes power is something you inherit instead of something you earn. Courtrooms don't exist to humble people. That's a misconception. Humiliation is emotional. The law is not. Courtrooms exist to equalize. Inside these walls, the janitor and the billionaire stand the same distance from consequences. That truth offends people who've never been told no without negotiation. It rattles those who confuse access with authority, popularity with immunity, noise with control. Christian didn't lose that day because of who his father is. He lost because he walked in believing the rules were flexible for him, and the law has no patience for that belief. I've watched men with armies of lawyers crumble because they underestimated a single quiet sentence: sit down. I've watched women with nothing but dignity walk out stronger because they understood that respect buys more protection than influence ever will. What happened in that courtroom wasn't personal, it wasn't emotional, it wasn't retaliatory, it was instructional. Because here's the truth: no one teaches you until it's too late. If your power depends on reminding people who you're connected to, you don't have power. Real power doesn't announce itself. Real power doesn't threaten. Real power doesn't borrow names. It stands still and lets others reveal themselves. Christian revealed insecurity wrapped in confidence. That's not unique, that's common. What made this moment different is that the room didn't reward it, and that's what courts are for. When the doors closed behind him, the lesson didn't end. It followed him into meetings, into conversations, into the pause before his next sentence. That hesitation is growth trying to happen. Whether he allows it is no longer my concern. My role ends where accountability begins. To anyone watching this story unfold and thinking, that could never be me, be careful. Arrogance doesn't announce itself either. It shows up quietly, disguised as certainty. And to those who think the law bends for the loudest voice in the room, remember this: the loudest voice is usually the weakest. Court is adjourned. Not just in that room, but in the mind of anyone who still believes privilege outranks principle.